Hi everyone, how are you doing? I'm Benazir and I'll be co-hosting today's community call with Doru from the team. Um, yeah, and quickly, show of hands if anyone would like to take notes. I think that's the first order of business.
I see James is raising his hand in the video, but
Great,
oh,
lovely.
and Jorge
Thank you,
is
James.
raising it in
That's very
Zoom.
kind. Thank you. And yeah, you've started recording the meeting, right? Yes. Okay,
Yep.
good. Yeah, and welcome everyone. These are the Hyperlight bi-weekly meetings. They happen once every 2 weeks. Believe me, I have been asked what bi-weekly is because I keep saying fortnightly. So that's the British way, and I realize that, yeah, bi-weekly essentially means the same thing. So yeah, and they are recorded. This is for everyone to know. We have limited time today, and we do have quite a few discussion items, so let's get right to it. I'd like to start off quickly with emphasizing the CNCF Code of Conduct. We're an open, inclusive, and respectful community, and yeah, we just essentially encourage participation from everyone. You can read more about our Code of Conduct at our GitHub repository, and I'll also share a link in the chat. Let's start with the latest release. Thoughts?
Mhm. Who added this as an announcement? Is there anything folks would like to call out in the 0.6.0 release of Hyperlight?
Um,
I didn't add
I
it as an announcement, but maybe you can go over the just the release notes. We can see some major items. One that
Yeah.
I'd like to give a shout out to is adding component bindgen macros. That was a really big item that we merged in this PR. Also removing the hypervisor handler thread. I think we saw improvements of about 50%, which is really cool to look back because, and I think I shared this with Ludwig, who's the author of the PR. Back when we added the hypervisor handler thread, we got an improvement of 99%. And now we removed it and we got an extra improvement of 50%. So it's we're pretty fast now.
Yep. And this one particular may have some breaking changes if anybody's consuming Hyperlight, right? I think, but yeah, could work for that. Yep, there's a lot. Feel free to take a look at the release notes. Hopefully they're accurate. Yep.
Doro, would you like to cover the next one? It's
yeah,
support ELF core dump creation on guest crash.
yeah, sure. So this item has been opened for quite some time, and I managed to merge it earlier today. So for the next release, we will have support for generating core dumps for guests that crash and don't have handling of the exception or crash by any other reason. The documentation includes everything one needs to do in order to inspect and enable generation of crash dump reports.
Awesome. I think this will help a lot.
I have a
Okay, I
lot of
think,
information.
do you have something more to add, Doro?
No, that would be all.
Okay. I think yeah, we had one of these PRs that I did catch from our Slack recently, which was, I don't know if this is still an initial work in progress. Maybe George, if I'm saying your name right, or is it, you can please
Yeah,
correct.
that's perfectly
Yeah.
fine.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you want
The
to talk about
original.
improving Hyperlight WASM to use upstream
Yeah.
Hyperlight. Yeah.
So as mentioned before, the release 0.6 brings a lot of breaking changes,
Yeah.
and some of those, the PR is about updating Hyperlight WASM to run with 0.6, which as it brings component utilities to Hyperlight, instead of relying on a branch or a fork of Hyperlight, we can use upstream Hyperlight. So that's mainly like moving to upstream instead of relying on a fork. And the other thing is adding all the breaking changes that happened, like from the fork that we were using before to 0.6. There's two outstanding issues. One is that there's a static that went private, so we will probably need an extra release, a patch release, to make it public again, which is the OS page size. That one disappeared, so we have to make it public again. I don't see a way around that. The other one is that before there were some capabilities to do introspection of the host functions from the guest, and that capability was removed because it was not being used in Hyperlight Core, but Hyperlight wasn't relying on it. So there's an open discussion at the moment on how we should do this, because there are different solutions. One would be to revert the change. That would need to an extra release from Hyperlight, and would mean a change in Hyperlight Core. But there are solutions where we can do this from the Hyperlight WASM crate without needing changes in Hyperlight Core. The way to do it from the Hyperlight WASM crate has certain advantages. Yeah, Simon, I know you have strong opinions on that.
Necessarily strong. It's just that it worked before, we removed it, we should put it back and then take our time to think about what the proper solution is. That's my perspective, because I don't know whether we need that thing in Hyperlight Core or not. Well, we did need it and we removed it, and if we put it back, then we're back to square one. Then we can discuss, do we need it really for Hyperlight WASM? Will we need it in the future for Hyperlight JS? Will we need it in the future for other dynamic things, or should that always be resolved in the host? There's a certain cost to resolving it in the host. And then secondary, the discussion about Hyperlight WASM is that we need it because we have module support, and we really need to figure out what we're going to do with module support in Hyperlight WASM in a broader sense, right? So I think the quickest thing to do, the simplest thing to do, given that we need to do another release anyway, is to put it back, unless Dan says it's a boatload of work to put it back. That's my opinion. It's not necessarily a strong one, but it's an opinion.
Dan?
So, well, the work to put it back, I just did last night. So it was reverting to commit. So the work is done. So if you want to, I guess I have to address some changes that were requested in the PR, but they should be simple enough and we can merge. And I guess it should be okay. But I would like to hear from Jorge about what the change was in Hyperlight WASM, because if we could avoid making an extra release of core and modifying core to support just this use case from Hyperlight WASM, I think that could be, at least worth considering.
Sorry, I lost the window. Where are we? So the changes, to bring back the changes from Dan to revert the PR, actually we need the pointer to the PEV. So that would need to bring, it's not just like adding one static, but that static has a type that has also been removed, so we need to bring all that back. I don't know how much more reverting that would mean. I will defer that to you, Dan. Regarding the changes in Hyperlight WASM, so we would need to serialize the function definition. That we can do that in like pretty straightforward way. We convert the parameters type to a vector, and the name is already string. It's not very complicated. The thing is that Hyperlight WASM has a wrapper for the sandbox, and we register the functions through that wrapper. And at that time, when we're registering the functions, we can store the type that we need to register afterwards. And that wrapper, when we load the WebAssembly runtime, we are already doing a guest call to load the WebAssembly runtime in the guest. And just before doing that, we can already do the guest call as well to register all the functions that we recorded during the sandbox creation step. So it's not it's way less code than what would be introduced by reverting the change. And I think there's some issues like the serialization could be done better. Like what I currently have is like a kind of funky serialization that works. I'm just converting the enum into an U8. It's not great, but it works for what we have. Yeah, Simon, Dan?
I think Dan's second question was about a release, and we need to do a release anyway, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we can't avoid the release because there's another break that we did that can't be worked around that requires us to do a release.
You're saying that we would have to do a release to bring back the PEB?
We have to do a release. Forget this issue, right?
Yeah.
Assume this issue's gone away because someone's dog's barking. Assume this issue's gone away because we did it the way Jorge said. We still have to do a release anyway. That's all I'm saying.
Because of the page size, right?
For some other reason, I can't remember what the issue was.
Okay, one of them is that the page size is private, so we need to make it public, and that would mean we have to do a release. Except if we're happy with hard coding some page size value in Hyperlight WASM.
No. Okay. And
now
before
that one I have got a strong opinion about, because we'll do that and then we'll change it in Hyperlight to use 2 meg pages, and then things will go wrong and we won't be able to figure out why.
So was the PEB pointer ever public, or you're saying that we used that in Hyperlight WASM?
No, the PEB pointer was not public, but the thing that was being exposed when you get the description of the host functions is stored, like the function that returns that reads that from somewhere relative to the PEB pointer.
Oh yeah, the host function buffer offset, right, which is in the PEB pointer, you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh,
that one is brought back in the PR. So you're saying we'll have to bring back that back regardless, I see. Yeah, then perhaps I guess we can go with what Simon's saying. We can just do this and perhaps improve later on. I'll address the final feedback that you have in the PR and go from there.
I can push the changes for like the fix involving only Hyperlight WASM in here if you want to take a look.
Why don't you two decide what the best thing to do is for you two? But the reason I've told you the reasons I thought we should do it the way that I thought we should do it. Like, go figure it out.
Yeah, I think it's fair. You're saying that it was working before. We can bring it back, and we can always undo the change later on if we can find a better way to do it. And then in this case, we don't have to rush Jorge's changes. With Jorge, you said there was like perhaps serialization that could be improved. You don't have to rush those changes now to get them in 06. You can take your time making those changes, and for now, we can just re-add the functionality.
Yeah, sounds good. Like either way, I'm happy with either way.
Yeah.
I have another item on the discussion list that I wouldn't mind incorporating if we agree to do it. I wouldn't mind incorporating into whatever patch release or point release we do. It's just a bit farther down the list. In fact, it's at the bottom.
Also, before we move on, I'll mention after we're done with the Hyperlight WASM updates, let's make sure to update the 2 example repos we have to no longer use the component model branches.
Yeah, definitely.
next item?
Okay, so the next item is enabling guest debugging for Hyper-V on Windows. This is something that I recently updated to the latest Hyperlight because it was some work done a month ago or something like that. So when you have some time, maybe have a look on it. Yeah, it enables guest debugging for uh, Hyper-V on Windows, so you will be able to actually debug guests on Windows without that in-process feature we used to have before eliminating it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so next item, visualizing benchmarks. James, do you have
Yeah,
something at hand?
maybe we should bring Simon's up forward because I think this is
Okay,
a priority.
okay, Simon.
Mine's right at the bottom.
Yeah.
I swapped a bit of. I talked a little bit with Shyam this morning, and he was trying to build Hyperlight with 866 64 unknown Linux muzzle because he wants to be able to build on, at least his idea is he can build on one Linux distro and deploy the same binary on another, and it will work. I'm not sure whether that's true, but anyway, there are a couple of features in our code base that cause a compile to fail on the muzzle version, the muzzle target. I have a PR to fix those. My question is more about how do we ensure that that works? The simplest way would just for us to switch to Linux, to x86 unknown Linux muzzle target rather than current target, which will work, and then we'll test it, or we can test both those things, or we can just not do this and say we don't support it. They're the three choices. But if we do support it, I'd like to get it into the patch release, which is why I brought it up.
George, Jorge.
Yeah, sorry. Which is the use case for Linux muzzle? I didn't fully understand. Do they want one binary that they can run in Linux or Hyperlight?
What he said to me today was that he wanted to be able to build on Ubuntu and deploy on Mariner. Deploy that binary on Mariner.
Oh, you mean for the host?
Yes. Sorry,
Oh, okay.
I should have been clearer. I'm sorry. Yes, for the
Okay,
host.
yeah.
It's nothing to do with the guest.
I can help with that. We have experience doing that in Runwasi.
I have the changes done and the test passing.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just a question
Perfect.
of whether we want to make this a switch permanently, whether we want to add another set of tests to our CI that build and test against this on each Linux distro, or whether we just want to go tough. You need to build it on whatever distro you're going to deploy it on. I think they're the three choices, right?
I think that building on CI another target would make it a lot slower than it already is. So I don't
Would
know.
it? Because it runs in parallel. We would just be using more compute.
Okay.
I don't know how to raise my hand, but I would prefer to not add more to the matrix for our CI or remove some. I think it's growing quite large, and maybe it'd be okay if we removed either the Windows Server 2022, which we now have 2025 running, or Mariner Linux, AZ Linux 2.
So what if I do this then? I put the pull request in. All the pull request does is just basically has a couple of one unconditional fix and a couple of conditional fixes. That will work. And and then I'll create an issue that says, let's discuss this, and we can figure out what we want to do. I think we're going to get rid of potentially a Windows one and one of the KVM ones, right? Sorry, one of the Mariner ones.
I think. Hopefully.
Yeah, so that would shrink it back down before we made it bigger again. Or we could do something like have a daily big CI job and do less in the PR validation, which is probably what we should do, really.
And we've mentioned doing that a couple of times. I think we need to figure out just like when we want to do that. And I think there's also been some comments from some other folks like Ludwig about possibly not doing the 5-minute fuzzing in every job and doing that as opposed to another daily job too.
Yeah.
I think we're maybe getting a
Okay.
little bit.
I'll push the PR and I'll open an issue.
Okay, Jorge.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would personally even prefer if we do the Linux muscle or preferred method, like if we release a binary, just release a Linux muscle. Also, question for you, Simon. The PR you have, does it produce a static binary? Or
I don't care, right? Because we just need to make sure that we compile our library with muzzle target, as I understand it. Because whether we do static or dynamic depends on how the host compiles, right? And we only have test hosts.
No. When for instance, is seccomp linked statically or dynamically, or if you want something that's really portable, it should be static. If it has dynamic linking, then you might be missing a library, or the particular library version that you need to use might be missing. I think particularly that might be tricky with seccomp.
Okay. For now, all I've tried to do, I looked to see whether this thing does static or dynamic linking by default, and it seems to do static by default. Although I couldn't really tell from the issue that exists whether it did or not. But for now, all the change does is ensures that it can compile using that target, and we don't release a binary. So it's up to the consumer to figure out how they want to link.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to jump the queue, so to speak.
No worries. We can continue with the benchmarks, James.
Would you like to share? I can
Yeah, I can share my screen quick. Let's see. So I just to kind of force myself to get familiar with kind of the CI and the build tools and everything, I was playing around with taking the benchmarks that we have and creating visualization graphs for them. We in Runwazi, Jorge had done this for us, and I think Joe did as well, but had helped us get these graphs. So I just try to replicate that here. So this is the version of Linux KVM, and it shows the graphs for all the benchmarks that we have. So we have some sort of visualization. This would have been maybe kind of cool to see when Ludwig's PR went in, if there was a drop off. I tried to like revert his PR and then run it and see if there was a huge drop in any of these graphs, but I couldn't revert it real easily. So yeah, so right now I just ran it a bunch of times just to see what the graphs would look like and kind of figure out what everything looks like. Yeah, so I thought I'd bring it up here and see if folks thought this was interesting, and if I should continue kind of bringing this in.
Simon.
I don't know, I've never really looked at them, but those benchmarks that we run as part of the PRs, as part of the release, they do produce a graph.
Yeah.
But I don't know what's in those graphs, and I don't know whether,
Yeah, so this basically takes those and visualizes them and puts them into a website. So
Okay.
yeah, so there's a tool that we were using in Runwazi, and it takes the benchmarks and you output it to a text file, and then it will generate the HTML and the JavaScript to be able to display this UI here. And so it basically just takes the exact output. So I didn't actually change anything in the
Okay.
outputs except for change the way that it outputs the data there. Um,
Okay. Okay.
and so this kind of comes back. I was able to I did this as like a periodic, so we could maybe remove some of the benchmarks from the thing, and then we'd have this as something
Yeah.
that ran
Yeah.
nightly
Yeah.
or every couple
Yeah.
of days or something.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. Um, yeah, so the thing I was on about is there's some HTML inside of the results that get stored when each benchmark is
Oh,
run,
is
but
it?
we don't do anything with it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it might be worth looking at that and seeing whether we can also publish that somewhere. If it's got any useful information in it, which I don't know whether it has or not. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention it.
Cool.
Jorge, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, so something interesting can be done with that tool is also to produce an alert if the benchmark has been like if you reduce the performance of something during the benchmarking. So you can specify like a percentage that's acceptable of variance. Like you can specify a variance, and then if it drops outside of that zone, then it fails. You can either like you do a failure in the CI check, or you can write a comment on the PR. So I see some value on running the benchmarks on the PRs. In like getting more ready feedback on where something goes wrong.
I don't think the benchmarks take too long because the jobs that usually get queued up are or wait too much for them are usually the Windows ones that, well, at the end they do run the benchmarks, but until they get to the benchmarks, it takes quite some time. Simon? You're on mute.
I'm trying to do two things at once here. We should try running these benchmarks on a machine where we have the whole host, because there's definitely some variation between the runs that's not explained by changes that are made, whether that's because of nested virtualization overhead and what's going on the host, not the host, the Hyperlight host, or whether it's because of noisy neighbor or something on the real host. I don't know, but we definitely see some changes in the benchmarks over runs that are not explained by anything to do with what we've done.
Yeah, this here is all the same commit, and you can see most of these are pretty close, but the couple of that are interesting are the drops. Those have some pretty large variance between them. I think that's the advantage of visualizing this is that we can actually kind of see if there is a huge large variance here. So that was kind of the idea. Mark.
Yeah, two comments. One is I think if we could do something like add the comments to the pull request or something that would be value and keeping the benchmarks there. And I wanted to respond to Dora's comment. I think we should see better throughput with the Windows Server 2025 images because we are now building those with in Packer and we have a lot more of the tools we need installed on there. So that's another reason to maybe drop the Windows Server 2022 images where we're just using generic the GitHub runner images. Oh, also, 5.5 minutes left. Go ahead,
Dan?
Jen.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think this is cool. I was initially confused because I didn't notice it was all the same commits at the bottom, but this is all variability across the same commit. So that's, I guess, something different from um, the other report that we have because it also compares with the previous benchmark and it puts a graph on that. It gives us data on mean, standard deviation, median, and so forth, which I think are also valuable. And I think the variation across commits, it has a graph, but it isn't as clear as this one. So maybe we could sort of use them both together. Although I'm not sure if this one just sort of updates on its own. If you have like a CD
Yeah,
for this. Yeah.
that's kind of the advantage of using that tool. We made it really easy to just get like a
Yeah.
really quick baseline of like what's happening. And then the other ones are still like I didn't change any of the like generating those things, and so we still have all that other data as well.
Yep.
So that you could potentially get into a deeper dive of the information.
Yes, I think this is cool.
Yeah, Jorge, Ludwig,
Go ahead, Jorge.
you're on mute.
Answering to that, if you refer to the plots generated by criterion, I think those are within like samples within the same benchmark. While what you see in here is so this is because James ran it on the same commit many times, but the idea would be that you see the result for each merge into main. So you would have one result per commit, or if you run it nightly, you would have one result per day. So that would give you an idea of how the performance changes as the code evolves. Instead, the other one is variability of the code for different runs of the same code.
Okay, but then does it just pick a mean value for that specific commit? Because we see variability even within the
Yeah,
same commit, right? Okay.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it just
It takes like the usually criterion. It runs many results and then it gives you the average and the
yeah.
standard deviation. This shows you the average, and then criterion generates for each sample. Then generates fancy plots with yeah.
Cool.
Ludwig?
I think this is great, and we should definitely publish something like this. I was also thinking, what more data do we want than just like these micro benchmarks, right? So I know Simon added some load testing framework in Hyperlight.js, and I think it would be nice if we could add more data to this kind of dashboard as well. Yeah, that's it.
I agree.
Two
I
minutes.
was going to add to your issue, Ludwig, but I think the two things that immediately spring to mind are we need to do some parallelization, some testing of in parallel. Whether we consider that load testing or not, I don't know. I think there's a bit more to load testing than that. And the second thing would be variation of things like the size of a sandbox. You know, as we go from 1 meg to 10 meg to 100 meg to 500 meg, you know, what impact does that have? And then variation of size of arguments, which might have been in your issue. I can't remember because I read it a couple of days ago. But yeah.
We have under 2 minutes left, under 1 minute actually. So I don't think we have the time to discuss the other items. CI is broken on KVM. Simon, you have something to add there?
Real quick.
Real
It's still
quick, yeah.
broken. If somebody would like to take a look at what I've done and try and figure out why I'm not getting the audit records to say what's making the change, just ping me and I'll happily hand it over and let you take a look.
Yeah. Okay then. So this was it. So thank you for attending. We'll be reviewing the new issues next time and the milestone. And yeah, have a good rest of the day. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Bye.
Zora and
Thank you.
Benazir for us.
Thank you for taking notes. Thank you, Benazir. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.